Every can of energy drink you crack open contains a compound your body treats almost identically to a stress hormone, and if you drink enough of it fast enough, it can throw your heart into a rhythm it can't recover from. The ingredient responsible isn't some obscure additive. It's caffeine, the same thing in your morning coffee, just concentrated and delivered in a way that makes it far easier to overdose on than most people realize. Here's what's actually happening inside your body. Caffeine blocks a receptor called adenosine, which is one of the chemical signals your brain and heart use to slow things down and relax. With that signal blocked, your body releases a flood of stress hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline among them, the same chemicals your body makes when it thinks you're in danger. Your heart rate climbs, your blood vessels constrict, and your heart starts contracting harder and faster than it normally would. In small, spaced-out doses, your body handles this easily, which is exactly why a cup of coffee in the morning is harmless for almost everyone. The danger appears when caffeine gets consumed in large amounts, quickly, especially stacked on top of other stimulants that energy drinks add specifically to intensify the effect. Taurine, an amino acid included in nearly every major energy drink brand, has been shown in laboratory studies to increase the force of heart muscle contractions on its own, and when combined with caffeine, researchers have found the two amplify each other's effects on the heart rather than simply adding together. Guarana, a plant extract used in many of these drinks, contains its own natural caffeine on top of whatever caffeine is already listed on the label, which means the actual stimulant load in some products is higher than the caffeine content alone would suggest. In vulnerable hearts, this combination can trigger something called QT prolongation, a disruption in the electrical timing that makes your heart beat. And if that disruption becomes severe enough, it can cascade into ventricular fibrillation, a chaotic, uncoordinated quivering of the heart muscle that stops it from actually pumping blood at all. Without immediate defibrillation, ventricular fibrillation is fatal within minutes. The FDA considers roughly 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, about 4 cups of coffee, generally safe for a healthy adult. But energy drinks are regulated differently than soda because many of them have historically been classified as dietary supplements rather than conventional beverages. Companies weren't required to cap or even always clearly disclose exactly how much caffeine was inside. And some cans contain several times what a standard soda does, a gap in labeling that persisted for years even as evidence of harm accumulated. Some brands eventually reclassified their products as beverages rather than supplements, partly in response to mounting regulatory pressure, though the underlying caffeine content in many of these drinks didn't meaningfully change. In December 2011, a 14-year-old girl named Anais Fournier drank one 24-ounce can of Monster Energy with friends at a mall, and then a full 24 hours later, a second can while relaxing at home. Roughly 480 milligrams of caffeine combined across the two, a little more than what's in 14 cans of Coca-Cola. Her mother later said she had actually told Anais to stay away from energy drinks specifically because she worried they weren't good for her. About 3 hours after the second can, Anais went into cardiac arrest at home. Paramedics got her heart going again, but the damage to her brain from the time it had gone without oxygen was already done. She was placed in a medically induced coma to try to control the swelling, and 6 days later, just before Christmas, her family made the decision to take her off life support. The Maryland Medical Examiner's official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia due to caffeine toxicity, though it's worth noting Fournier also had an underlying, previously undiagnosed heart condition, and Monster's own retained medical experts disputed that caffeine played any role at all, arguing her death resulted from that pre-existing condition instead. The case never reached a clear final verdict in court, ending in what appears to have been a confidential settlement, but it triggered a wave of similar wrongful death claims against energy drink companies and pushed lawmakers to scrutinize how these products are marketed to teenagers. A more clear-cut case came 6 years later. In April 2017, 16-year-old Davis Allen Cripe from South Carolina collapsed in his high school classroom after consuming a large McDonald's latte, a large Mountain Dew, and an energy drink within about 2 hours. He went into cardiac arrest and died that same day. Unlike the Fournier case, the coroner's ruling here was unambiguous, a caffeine-induced cardiac event with probable arrhythmia, and Cripe Cripe had no known pre-existing heart condition at all. What makes his case particularly unsettling is that the total caffeine he consumed likely didn't even cross the FDA's 400 milligram daily guideline. Doctors believe it wasn't purely the quantity that killed him, but the speed. 3 different caffeinated sources stacked back to back in a short window on top of an entirely healthy heart. There's a reason so many of these cases involve teenagers and young adults specifically, rather than being spread evenly across all ages. Caffeine's effects scale with body weight, and a 14-year-old simply has far less mass to dilute the same 480 milligrams than an adult would, which means an identical can hits a smaller body meaningfully harder. On top of that, a portion of sudden cardiac deaths in young people trace back to congenital heart abnormalities that have never been diagnosed. Conditions like the connective tissue disorder found in Anais Fournier's case, or undetected electrical wiring issues in the heart that produce no symptoms at all until the heart is placed under acute stress. A stimulant surge is exactly that kind of stress. For most young people with normal hearts, that stress is completely survivable, uncomfortable at worst, a racing pulse, and some jitteriness that fades in an hour. But for the small percentage carrying an undiagnosed vulnerability, there's no way to know it exists until the exact moment it's tested, and by then it's already an emergency. There's a related danger that turned out to be even more clear-cut than caffeine on its own, mixing it directly with alcohol. In the mid-2000s, a category of pre-mixed caffeinated alcoholic drinks became popular on college campuses, most infamously Four Loko, a 23.5-ounce can containing roughly 12% alcohol, the equivalent of several beers, alongside caffeine, guarana, and taurine. The danger wasn't a new chemical interaction so much as a psychological one. The stimulant effect of the caffeine masked how intoxicated drinkers actually felt, so people kept drinking well past the point where their body was telling them to stop. In September 2010, 23 students were hospitalized after drinking Four Loko at Ramapo College in New Jersey, and weeks later, 9 students at Central Washington University ended up in the hospital after a single party with blood alcohol levels as high as 0.35, a level considered potentially fatal on its own even before caffeine enters the picture. Several states banned the product outright within weeks. On November 17, 2010, the FDA sent formal warning letters to 4 manufacturers declaring that caffeine added to alcoholic malt beverages was an unsafe food additive under federal law. And within days, Four Loko's maker announced it would strip caffeine, guarana, and taurine from the recipe entirely rather than fight the ruling. The rule the FDA established that year still stands. You can order a caffeinated cocktail from a bartender, but a company is not legally allowed to premix and bottle the two together for retail sale, a distinction that exists specifically because of how dangerous that particular combination proved to be in practice. These aren't the only cases regulators have looked at. Between 2009 and 2012, the FDA received reports connecting 5-Hour Energy, a different, more concentrated product than a typical canned energy drink, to 13 deaths over roughly 4 years, alongside dozens of hospitalizations. The agency was careful to note that adverse event reports like these don't automatically prove causation, since anyone can submit one, and the underlying medical history of each person often isn't fully known. But the sheer volume was enough to trigger a formal FDA investigation into the product's safety. Around the same period, isolated international cases added to the pattern outside the US as well, including a young man in Nigeria who died shortly after drinking 8 cans of a caffeinated energy drink as part of a bet, and a case in Japan where a medical examiner concluded a man's death was caused by caffeine overdose linked to heavy energy drink consumption combined with caffeine pills. No single case proves that energy drinks are inherently dangerous for the general population, but taken together, they paint a consistent picture: healthy young people, a short window of extreme stimulant intake, and a heart that couldn't absorb the shock. This is really the core danger with energy drinks specifically. Not that caffeine itself is some hidden poison. Coffee has been consumed safely for centuries, but that energy drinks are engineered to deliver a large, fast dose in a format that doesn't feel as serious as it is. A can that tastes like fruit punch doesn't carry the same mental warning label that a triple espresso does, even when it contains just as much or more caffeine. And the marketing built around these products, extreme sports, late night gaming, all night studying, actively encourages exactly the kind of rapid, back-to-back consumption that puts the most strain on the heart. Regulators in several countries reached the same conclusion well before most of these American cases made headlines. France banned Red Bull's original formula outright in 1997, citing concerns from its National Food Safety Agency over the unfamiliar combination of high caffeine content and taurine, a ban that stayed in place for over a decade before being lifted once EU-wide regulations standardized labeling instead. Denmark and Norway imposed similar restrictions around 2001. More recently, the concern has shifted specifically toward young people. A 2013 study commissioned by the European Food Safety Authority found that roughly 68% of European adolescents between the ages of 10 and 18 consumed energy drinks, a number high enough to alarm public health officials across the continent. In 2014, Lithuania became the first country in the world to pass an outright ban on selling energy drinks to anyone under 18, with Latvia following shortly after, and countries including the UK, Poland, and Hungary have since introduced their own restrictions or voluntary industry codes aimed specifically at reducing how much of this stimulant load ends up in developing bodies. Cardiologists who study these cases point to a specific danger zone: healthy young hearts subjected to a sudden, sharp spike in stimulant load, particularly when combined with exercise, dehydration, or an existing undiagnosed heart abnormality that the person has no way of knowing about until the moment it matters. Emergency room visits tied to energy drink consumption in the United States roughly doubled between 2007 and 2011 alone, according to federal drug abuse monitoring data, with the sharpest increases concentrated among teenagers and young adults, precisely the demographic these products are most aggressively marketed toward. Most people who drink energy drinks regularly will never experience anything close to cardiac arrest. The vast majority of cans consumed every single day pass through the body without incident, processed and cleared the same way a cup of coffee would be. But for a small, largely unpredictable subset of people, often young, often with a heart condition nobody has diagnosed yet, the difference between a normal afternoon and a medical emergency comes down to nothing more than how many cans they drank and how fast. If you like this video, subscribe for similar ones or join my Discord to suggest another.